Radio Show.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in today to the 25th Hour Radio Show here on Monster Radio AM 1150. I am your host, Rob Fairless, and on the phone with me today is a man who has been researching and lecturing on the famous Shroud of Turin for over 25 years. The shroud, of course, is a linen cloth which bears the image of a man alleged to be Jesus of Nazareth. Mr. Russ Breault. Russ, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to join me on the show.
Hey, Rob, it's my pleasure to be with you. Thanks.
No problem. So, Russ, I know I gave a brief description of what the shroud is there in the introduction, but being that you're the expert, how would you describe what it is?
Well, the shroud is a 14-foot-long linen cloth, about 3.5 feet wide, so it's very long but kind of narrow, and it's in Turin, Italy, hence the name Shroud of Turin. It's been there since 1578. And before that, it was in France for about 250 years. And then, and on this cloth is the image of about a 5'10" bearded crucified man, frontal image and dorsal image, back image. And so you have this very faint image of a man, and yet there's also a clear pattern of bloodstains. That bloodstains from wounds that seem to correlate with the biblical account of the crucifixion, with the crown of thorns all around the head and the back of the head. And there's scourge marks all over the body. There's nail wounds in the wrists, nail wounds in the feet, wound in the side. The legs are not broken. So everything seems to line up wound-wise with what happened to Jesus. So obviously, the big question is, could this be the actual burial shroud that wrapped Jesus in the tomb, or is it nothing more than some medieval hoax?
Now, how did you first get introduced to the shroud?
Well, that was way back in 1980. I was a writer for the college newspaper, and news of the shroud was very big at that time because you had a whole team of scientists go to Turin, Italy in 1978, almost 40 scientists, most of whom were American, and they brought tons of equipment from various laboratories throughout the United States. This was huge news back then, and lots of news articles, documentaries, news stories, and in fact, National Geographic did a big spread on it in June of 1980. So I was intrigued by it, so I asked if I could write some articles for the college newspaper, and they gave me the green light, and I did all my research and talked to the scientists, and I got hooked. I've been involved ever since.
So you started writing about it in your college newspaper. At what point in time did it go from being more or less a hobby to something more serious than that?
Well, when in October of 1981, I attended the first scientific symposium on the shroud. It was held at New London College, or at Connecticut College in New London, Connecticut. And that's when all of the scientists gave all their different presentations based on their research. It was a 2-day conference, so you had chemists and physicists and biologists, and you had archaeologists, historians, and they're all there presenting their various aspects of research. And I got to meet everybody, and I said, man, this is an incredible mystery, and nobody knows anything about it. You see, one of the most important conclusions of the Shroud Project is that there is no visible trace of any kind of paint, ink, dye, pigmentation, stain. There are no substances on the cloth to account for the image. So if we're going to allege that it's the work of some medieval artist, well, he is a genius beyond Leonardo, because we can't figure out how this thing could be the work of an artist if there's no evidence of any artistic substances. And then you have a whole pattern of bloodstains. So is that just paint? Is it animal blood? Well, in fact, it's blood. It's human blood, AB blood type. And in 1995, we determined that there's human male DNA. So the plot certainly thickens. Now, this doesn't mean that we can prove it absolutely to be the burial shroud of Jesus, because we don't have the DNA of Jesus to match it up. But we can certainly prove what it's not, and it doesn't appear to be the work of an artist.
Now, I'm going to get right to it here. Do you believe the image is of Jesus Christ or someone else?
Well, I always say this. If this is the image of a real human being, and that's what the forensic pathologists say, and who died from those wounds, and that's what the blood chemists say, Well, then I can't see it's anybody else because see, we have to remember that when you match up the wounds, the crown of thorns is an enormous thing. It was a singular mockery for the man who claimed to be king of the Jews. Not everyone got a crown of thorns as a routine of crucifixion, and so that is very singular to the crucifixion account of Jesus. And then secondly, you have a man here who's brutally scourged, about 120 scourge marks on the body. Why was he scourged so badly? Because Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, didn't want to kill him. He thought he was innocent. He didn't want to kill an innocent man. And so consequently, he had him scourged to an inch of his life, thinking that would be enough. But it wasn't enough. And so now we have an image of a man who's brutally scourged and crucified. And then you have the legs are not broken. Usually, the scripture tell you that the legs of those who are crucified are broken to speed asphyxia, which is the inability to breathe. Then they quickly die, and then they can remove them from the cross and throw them into a common grave. But when they came to Jesus, he was already dead, so they didn't break his legs. But what did they do? They've stabbed him in the side to make sure that he was dead. So everything matches.
What about people who say, this can't be Jesus because of the carbon dating?
Well, the carbon dating is a problem for sure. But then we find out that they violated the sampling protocol. They took one sample from the outside, been held and handled hundreds of times over the centuries. And so the location on the cloth that would be most subject to contamination, or perhaps some kind of a reweave or some kind of a medieval repair, there's certainly evidence for that. And so since the carbon date is limited to one sample instead of three different samples, if there's a problem with that corner, we're never going to know. And so the problem with carbon dating is that you have a flawed methodology to it. So can we really hang our hat on that? And then the latest dating research came out of Padua University in Italy in 2013 by assessing the rate of chemical and mechanical decay of about a dozen other pieces of linen from the current era, dating all the way back to 5,000 years old. And just so you have, cloths 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old, and so forth. And by plotting the rate of chemical and mechanical decay in those other cloths, and then comparing the same of the amount of decay with the shroud, with fibers from the shroud, they gave the shroud a date range of 280 BC to 220 AD. Well, now first century is right smack in the middle. So now who's right and who's wrong?
How do you explain, or how are people explaining, how the image actually came to be on the cloth?
Well, one of the attributes of the image is this. If you Google the shroud, or you see an image of it, and you'll see the first thing you'll see is a whole pattern of burns and patches, because it was in a fire in 1532, and that's the first thing you're going to see. And then you'll realize that the image lies between these kind of two parallel lines, which are nothing more than scorches, burns, and patches from that fire. And then the fire was doused with water, so you have a pattern of water stains, and you have a pattern of blood stains. Well, if you flip the cloth over, you'll see all that. You'll see the burns, the water stains, and the blood stains, but you will not see the image of the man. The image of the man is a purely superficial phenomenon affecting only the top 1 to 2 microfibers, not threads, microfibers. And each individual thread is made up of about 200 microfibers. So that means that this image resides on less than 1% of a single thread. So you have to say to yourself, well, what artistic process is this? And plus the image appears to be uniform in intensity, top to bottom, front to back. You'd think you need a piece of technology to do something like that. So we don't necessarily know how the image came to be. There's all kinds of theories, naturalistic theories. There's theories related to radiation, light, I'm in for light because I think the image is the result of the resurrection, and it's if you do a Bible study on what happened to Jesus in the tomb, well, there were no eyewitnesses to the resurrection event because there was a big stone in front of the entrance.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to look at other scriptures, and the scripture gives us a couple of good clues, and the first one's called the Mount of Transfiguration, which occurred before Jesus was even crucified. And the story goes that he goes up to the top of a high hill. Peter, James, and John are down at the bottom, and the scripture says that he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun itself, and his clothing became dazzling light. So here Jesus is transformed into a being of light before the crucifixion. And then he shows up, and then Saul, who becomes the Apostle Paul, is rounding up these renegade Jewish believers in Jesus and having them put in jail. So this is about 4 or 5 years after the crucifixion. All of a sudden, Jesus shows up on Saul's way when he's on his way to Damascus in a blinding flash of light, so bright that Saul is blinded from this light, falls to the ground. He's blinded for 3 days. So just do a straight Bible study. I mean, light is definitely involved. So if you ask the question of what happened to Jesus in the tomb, the very split second his soul came zooming back into that lifeless body, I think you'd have to assume that there was an explosion of light and then gone. And that's what I think, and that's what I think caused the image. Now, how it caused the image, I don't know, but I'm just pretty sure that's the cause of the image.
Now, does the Catholic Church take a side on the shroud's validity?
The official position is it's called a symbol of Christ's suffering worthy of veneration. The official position is that they don't call it a relic because that would say it's authentic. They don't call it an icon because that would say it's the work of man. They call it a symbol, which is a really smart stance to take because whether it's authentic or not, it certainly remains a symbol. And so that's the official. Now, most of the recent popes over the past 100 or so years have all affirmed it being a relic. So we know where the popes stand. But officially, the official position of the Catholic Church is symbol.
Now, is the shroud available for public viewing?
No.
It's not?
It's only about once every 10 years is it brought out during a public exhibition. Other than that, it's sealed up in a tight box with argon gas, steady state temperature and humidity to help preserve it, and it's and kept in the dark because light exposure to the light will further deteriorate it.
Now, have you yourself seen the shroud in person?
Yeah, I've seen it 3 times, and it's awesome. I mean, it's a remarkable thing, and it's so and what I do as a lecturer, I go around to churches and schools, and I do something which I call it Shroud Encounter. Another name for the presentation I do is called CSI Jerusalem: The Case of the Missing Body, and so I walk the audience through a 90-minute a presentation, about 200 images on the big screen. Where we'll go through the history, the science. We'll go through the crucifixion based on the shroud, the resurrection based on the shroud, and finally even an exploration of the post-resurrection body. And so it's a very comprehensive thing.
Now, this presentation you're talking about, the Shroud Encounter, that's available for anyone, right? It's not just for colleges and universities, right? It's for churches as well.
Oh no, it's available for churches. I do churches all the time, and it's anyone's welcome to go to shroudencounter.com, and there's a page there on a church tour page and a college tour page. You can take your choice.
Now, I see on your biography here you also appeared on the History Channel's documentary, The Real Face of Jesus, a question mark there.
Right.
Where they took the image from the shroud and scientifically created what the actual face of the person in the image looked like. Now, that had to be pretty exciting to be involved in a project like that, since you're so interested in researching the shroud.
It was a fantastic documentary. It comes around on History Channel about every year. It's usually, obviously, around Easter time, and I think they've since renamed it, and I think it's The Face of Jesus Uncovered now. It's the same documentary. They've done some updates to it, but it is a fabulous 2-hour documentary. It's one of the best made, and I think you can give it ordered on DVD off Amazon or something, and it's that was a great one. And then another one was called The Holy Winding Sheet, which was a documentary I did for about 2 years ago on EWTN.
Now, were you pleased with the outcome of The Face itself? Are you confident that's what the man in the shroud looked like?
Absolutely. I mean, Ray Downing is a marvelous 3D animator, and he's using state-of-the-art technology. And I can. That's his rendition is probably the best rendition yet of what the man on the shroud looks like.
You know, going back just real quick to talking about when you saw the shroud itself, did you have like some sort of gut feeling when you saw it?
Well, when I saw it in 1998, I had already been lecturing for 18 years on it. And it was when I was initially kind of disappointed, not with the shroud, but with myself, because here I am, I'm up front, close and personal, and you think that this would be a deeply spiritual, religious moment, but I unfortunately had my analytical hat on, and I said, "Yep, there are the burns, and there's the water stains, and there's the there's where they cut the sample, and I was looking at it more from an analytical standpoint, and so after you and you can only stay up front just for a few minutes, and then afterwards you can sit in the back for as long as you want. So I went around and sat in the back. And I'm looking at it from afar, and that's when I began to really contemplate the meaning and the message of it, and that's when it really hit me. Where Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life." Though a man die, yet shall he live. Do you believe this? And then he talks about the do you not know that we were bought with a price? And so there's the price that was paid right there. It's in fact, one of the things I've come to the conclusion of is that I think the shroud is actually a receipt. In other words, there are 4 words used in Scripture to describe what Jesus accomplished for us on the cross, and those words are bought, purchased, redeemed, ransomed. They're all words of transaction. And so obviously a transaction has occurred. A payment has been made on our behalf. And I'm saying to myself, you go to a store, you purchase anything, what does the cashier always give you?
Yeah.
A receipt. What is a receipt? It's a proof of purchase. What's on the receipt? The price you paid. So when Peter and John ran to the tomb and saw the linen cloth lying there, what did they see? I think they saw the receipt. And when they opened it up, what did they see? The price that was paid. You see, not only is the shroud a receipt, in my opinion, I think it's also an itemized receipt documenting everything that was paid.
That's pretty deep, Russ, man. I never thought of it that way. That's a really neat way of thinking about that.
Well, there are 4 words used to describe what the shroud is. We talked about one of them. It's called a symbol. It's a mystery. It's an artifact. It's a relic. And those words don't really mean much. But you call it a receipt, and all of a sudden that brings you back to a theological concept. And so the concept of the receipt is huge. And that's how I close out every Shroud Encounter, at least in a church. I don't do that in a college, but in a church setting, I usually close with the receipt concept, and it's exceedingly powerful.
Yeah. What about outside of all the shroud business and work altogether, the personal side of Russ Breault? I mean, you got any hobbies or activities you're involved with?
Well, I'm involved in a lot of things. I do another presentation called Unmasking Evolution. What's your high school textbook forgot to tell you? And I love doing that one. I have another presentation called A Guided Tour of the Kingdom, an exploration of near-death experiences and the wonderful realm that awaits your arrival. Because I think those accounts are incredible. Some of the stories, people dead on the operating table, and about 25% of them go off and they're experiencing something even out of their bodies. It's just amazing, and so these are some of the things I work on as well beyond just the shroud itself. It's I don't know. I don't really have a lot of hobbies outside of the work.
Sound like you don't have much time to have hobbies.
Say the truth, I'm pretty well focused on this stuff.
What about website and social media? Do you have a preferred location people can find you at?
Yeah, they can go to shroudencounter.com, and you'll find everything about me as a presenter and a lecturer, and a lot of the different lectures that I do. I mentioned a couple others. On the shroudencounter.com, it'll link to my Facebook page, which is Facebook.com/Shroud Encounter, and then I also have a YouTube channel with a lot of different videos up there from different conferences. I have a sister shroud site called ShroudUniversity.com. It's really more of an academic site, so I wouldn't go there unless you really want to get into the weeds on this subject.
Sounds interesting, though. I'm sure there's people out there that will go there. Russ,
Yep.
Before we wrap this up, is there anything you'd like to say to the listening audience out there? Anything I might not have covered?
I would just explore the shroud and keep an open mind. My key verse is John 6:40, where Jesus says, "It is my Father's will that anyone who looks to the Son and believes in Him shall have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day." So I like that, because whoever who look, other translation, who sees the Son, who looks to the Son. Well, we can look with eyes of faith, and we can also look with our physical eyes at the shroud, and they both bring us to the same place.
Well, I'll definitely be on the lookout for the Shroud Encounter if it's ever in this local area. I'm definitely there. Russ, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Well, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.